letting Donald Rocha come to the mic.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. I'll first start with thanking everybody for making time and attending this. I want to thank Ed for his coordination and work very much. Thank you very much, Ed. Let's give him a round of applause for the amount of effort. It always impresses me, folks involved in the community that put in the time and effort and don't get paid. I am in awe of so many folks in District 9 area and citywide that really spend a lot of time getting involved civically. And that was something I was talking to John about a little bit ago is, it's a two-way street. Yes, your elected officials should get in front of you. Yes, your elected officials should reach out to you. Yes, they should make time and hear your issues. But the two-way street that I'm talking about is if they're not listening, it's incumbent upon you to get in front of them and tell them. And I have to admit, sometimes as a city council member, you get tunnel vision, you're doing your job and you're blowing through 100 miles an hour. And when somebody gets in your face a little bit and says, hey, nobody's hearing us, nobody's listening, can you help? You can imagine your focus shifts a little bit and you do provide attention. And again, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be doing that all the time, but your role is making sure your elected officials are hearing you. And the Neighborhoods Commission is a great model as well. Remiss, Pam Foley, one of our elected officials here, San Jose Unified, thank you for being, thanks for coming. And I'm going to wrap it up right here and just thank you for even letting me speak. I'm going to acknowledge Sharon Eriksson, who's going to be doing a presentation, and that annual report that you're going to hear about, and I'm sure many of you have already heard it, is truly impressive. And I think John also used another word, I'm going to keep plagiarizing him, eye-opening or eye-popping when you see it. And it really, for council members, is as well. And the amount of time and work she puts into it, she's a complete professional with this. We're lucky to have her and that department because they provide unbiased information to the council for us to look at as we make decisions. And I want to thank you for your years and years and years and years and years and years of service. There's an inside joke here. We just had a meeting with her privately. It's an inside joke. So thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you for taking time for doing what you're doing. So thanks for having me.
Okay, other people can make this stuff work when I can't. So I'm Sharon Winslow Erikson. I am very pleased to be your city auditor. I actually, to follow Don's joke, I actually started working for the city in 1989, so I have been around for a while. I came back I left for a while and then came on back as quickly as I could to be your city auditor almost 10 years ago at this point. So I am going to turn on there it is. Okay. Is there an adjustment here can I get you to look at that? So we're going to try and make this slide presentation come up. So I'm going to talk to you today about 3 different reports that we do, but let me start off by saying a little bit about the auditor's office. So we are a staff of 15. There's 15 of us. We're up on the 14th floor of City Hall, so I joke with people that from the 14th floor of City Hall, you can see most of San Jose. So I'm always waving outside the window to my staff to make sure that they understand that the work we're doing is for the residents of San Jose, that the residents of San Jose pay our salaries. They're the ones who are paying the taxes. They're funding the services that we provide. We don't in City Hall create money. It comes from all of you. So the important thing is that we make sure that you get the services you deserve for the tax dollars that you've put into the system. The city charter actually authorizes our office. We are authorized under the city charter, so this was a vote of the people to amend the city charter to bring our office into play about 30, 40 years ago at this point. What we are authorized to do is we oversee the city's external financial auditors. They do the audit of the city's financial statements. I'll talk a little bit about that. We also were authorized under that to do performance audits of the efficiency and effectiveness of city programs. We have access to all city records, all city employees to do that work. Just a little bit more, our current projects include vehicle abatement, homeless assistance programs, public works project cost delivery, community center reuse. So you can see, in addition to covering kind of the basics of was payroll properly calculated, we're also looking at the efficiency and effectiveness of programs. So the first of these three documents I want to talk about, once I figure out how to make this work, is our audit of open government. Now, I did bring a few copies of that. So it's the blue cover report. All of our reports are also online. There are a few copies of that on the back table. The second report I'm going to talk about, just so you know, is the purple one. This year it's purple. We realized we needed to change colors every year. We kept getting them mixed up. I'll talk about that one next. And then the other report I'm going to talk about, I brought a couple of copies, are the city's financial statements. So I'll go through those. To start with the open government report, this is one of these reports that we do call a performance audit. Yeah. You know, I think I'm just going to kind of move on over here if I can. Sorry about that. So this is an example of where the residents of San Jose got involved in the Sunshine Reform Task Force. So it was a 15-member citizen task force. Representatives included neighborhood groups, labor organizations, business groups, the media, others. These provisions in the Sunshine Reform Task Force, this was, prior mayor was interested in the Sunshine Reforms. So it was 2006. It was appointed to promote open, accessible, and inclusive government. Now, it takes a while for government to work, but in 2014, only a mere 8 years later, but it does happen, the City Council actually adopted the Open Government Ordinance and the Open Government and Ethics Resolutions. So today, many of those practices, when we went in there, last year, when we went in there to look at it, many of these practices are now routine. So I happened to be around when we switched from 3 days notice of a council agenda item to 10 days notice. That's now routine. People expect to do that. That information is generally up on the web on any council agenda item 10 days in advance. So what I do, a hint for you, maybe if you don't know it already, is I look Friday afternoon, evening. Some of them don't come out till 5 o'clock, or maybe 5:30, 5:45. But the Friday before, so 10 days in advance of the council meeting, you'll see that agenda being populated with the memos that if you want to have an opinion about those things, you may want to read those memos. And then you know the second Tuesday, you should be down at the council chambers. So these do build on state law. So state law requires 3 days notice. San Jose is now 10. So in our 2017 audit results, we found several improvements are still needed. So this is the kind of thing that we're doing when we do a performance audit. And I thought, and Ed thought this one would be of particular interest to this group. So we do have remaining work. We, meaning the city, has additional work to do on disclosure of public subsidies. So how much do different organizations get from the city if we aggregate together all of their grants? Timely posting of city official calendars, lobbyist reporting, revolving door ordinance. We found some issues there and made recommendations in our report to correct those. Responding more efficiently to records requests. The city does have problems with its records management system. We've also got this extraordinary explosive growth in electronic records, so now people are keeping everything. So if you ask for a draft report or emails, Do you get the one email, or do you get all the strings and all the copies of emails, if you know what I mean? So that is an issue we need to continue to address as a city. The city has not been doing the periodic reporting on compliance with the sunshine reform recommendations that was originally thought should happen. And then we found just additional training is needed across the city, so amongst city staff, about what is required to make sure all of our boards and commissions meet Brown Act requirements, meet the sunshine requirements, and so on. So there is a lot of work still to do. In our reports, we make recommendations to the administration of the city. So I should say, I work directly for the city council, so I'm appointed by the city council. That makes me independent from the administration. So I don't work for the city manager. I report kind of co-equally to the city manager. It's just that I have 15 people and he has like 6,000, but who's complaining? The next report then I wanted to talk about was what we fondly call this annual services report. And I hopefully we'll have time either during the break or after this to answer any questions you have, but I'm gonna keep plowing through because we're a little late. So the annual services report, this is actually the 10th year that we've done this report. So ever since I got back to San Jose as the city auditor, we instituted this report. The purpose of this is to give you really basic information about the city, the kind of stuff that I figured would be readily available. It turns out it's not necessarily readily available, but it doesn't mean that residents don't need this kind of information. So it's just the facts about the city of San Jose. And what I'm going to do is run you through the report so you have an idea how to use it, where to find stuff. Let me give you my example. If I gave every one of you $100 to go buy a pair of shoes, do you think we'd all come back with the same set of shoes? No. So there is no one right way necessarily to deliver city services. We all prioritize different things. There is a limited pot of money. We're deciding collectively between us where to spend that money. So is it public safety? Is it streets? Is it community centers? Is it kids swimming lessons? Where do we want to spend that money? And what's the level of service that we all feel is a baseline level of service? So that's the kind of thing where I think to have that conversation without just throwing it up into the political realm, you've got to have basic facts. So what is the fire department's response time? How long does it take them to get there? Is that sufficient? Now, I may think one thing is sufficient and you may think another, and that's all right. That's democracy. That's how it works. In this country anyway, where people have a say about what's most important. So I'm gonna, we start out this report just with a community profile, and I'm always kind of amazed how popular this section is, but most of it straight out of the census records, but we can get access to those. Again, it's the kind of thing that you would think everybody would know, but sometimes it really helps to put this stuff down on paper. So as you can see in the upper left-hand corner here, San Jose's population keeps growing. It's up about 10% over the last 10 years. With more than 1 million people, we're the 10th largest city in the country. We're the 3rd largest in California. We are ethnically diverse. We're about 35% Asian, 32% Hispanic, 26% white. You can see those in those pie charts down on the bottom, and they're going to be in your hard copy of the report as well. About 40% of San Jose residents are currently foreign-born. More than half of residents speak a language other than English at home. This is really important when we're sitting there in City Hall to remember when we're trying to communicate to all segments of our community how important it is that we have language accessibility. Now, even though you can see on the top right-hand corner here, the median household income is now over $100,000. What we point out in our report is 17% of households earn less than $35,000. The next section is 2017 marked the 7th year that we participated in a survey called the National Citizen Survey. It's administered across the country. And being an auditor, I like it because it's cheap. It's a written survey. It's standardized, so we don't have the opportunity to change questions on it. We administer it in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. A total of almost 2,000 residents either responded to the written survey or opted in online to participate. So while 58% of residents rated their neighborhoods as a good or excellent place to live, 66% plan to remain in San Jose, only 43% last year rated the overall quality of life as good or excellent, and we'll be talking about some of that. So there is some issues in the community about the quality of life that are going. I did want to point out that in some of these graphics, so the bottom at the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see those trends. So this is what we're trying to do with this report. It's really hard. If I tell you 43%, is it good or bad? How do you know? So one of the things we do is we try to show you how that's changed over time. You can see if it's a trend, and then you decide whether or not you think that's a problem or not. Some of the declines we saw, the largest declines were overall appearance, cleanliness of San Jose, and of course our favorite, housing options dropped. It's down there way at the bottom. You can see that startling drop from 50% way down to more like, I think it's 17% at this point, rate housing options in San Jose as good or excellent. The next section is a little bit more about the survey. I did want to point out, we ask residents for their priorities. Feeling of safety, public safety almost always comes out on top. What we're seeing is the ease of getting to places. So transportation as being something that's of increasing concern to our residents. It is interesting that San Jose's public participation, so the bottom right-hand corner, those numbers keep going up. So they've started to climb and they're going up. And I would say, in part, that's thanks to people like you. In terms of our financial conditions, so the next slide. So we do compare financial condition as part of this report. Being auditors, we can't help to do that. The couple of things I wanted to point out to you about this is you can see San Jose's revenue per capita is down there. We're right above Fresno. So we may be the capital of Silicon Valley, but we've got some revenue issues if we look at revenues divided by number of residents. So that's revenues per capita. In terms of expenditures per capita, we're way down there as well. And then the part that does concern me as your auditor is this capital asset value. So we actually were the only jurisdiction among those we surveyed where our capital assets lost value. What this means is it's the value of our streets, community centers, city hall, all that other stuff. We are building and investing less than we're using up. So if you think about depreciation, so you hear the word depreciation, what it's a proxy for is how much are we using up of the stuff that other people who came before us built. And we're using up more than we're putting in. So it continues to be a concern of mine. It may be a result, as we think about it, of the decade of investment. We really spent a lot of money upgrading a lot of facilities, so that may be part of it. Now, I did want to take just a moment to tell you, so those numbers come out of from this slide, or are appropriately green for St. Patrick's Day slide, come out, and about money, come from the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So I brought a couple of these, and I'm going to pass them around the room so you can see what they are. You're not going to be able to see this, but it is the basic financial statements of the city. So it is columns of numbers, explanations of those numbers. Now, San Jose is required to do these. By the way, your federal government is not, but we're required to do this. It's part of my job to make sure these financial statements get prepared to provide you assurance this is an accurate representation of where the money that San Jose has was spent. So these are numbers you can trust. You can go on, these are online, and you can go online and you can use a search feature to find something that you want. If you want information about any of these numbers, it's pretty high level, it groups it. So you're not going to necessarily be able to see how much money was spent on a particular community center, but you are going to be able to see how much money was spent overall. So please feel free. I'm going to pass. Could I ask you to pass these around just so you can have a look? Because I think too often people never see those annual financial statements. So just so you could see that. On the next section, I just wanted to talk about overall staffing. You've heard a lot about the city's overall budget deficits. Now, let me tell you, the city is required to balance its budget. So when we talk about a projected deficit, that's how much the city had to cut in order to come back to zero. So every year the city has to be at zero. You know, we don't, sometimes we save a little bit of money, but in general, we can't deficit spend in the city of San Jose. Does that make sense? So it's got to be a balanced budget. Revenue has to match expenditures. So you can see in this chart on the left, so those were the general fund shortfalls that we had. Those were the really bad years after the recession, as our retirement costs started escalating, and revenues just kind of stayed flat or dropped off a little bit. So that's where those years where we had $110 million deficits, that means the city was slashing services. Some of the departments that got hit the hardest were things like Parks and Rec, where they just laid off a lot of people. The planning department, there was virtually no building going on after the real estate market crashed, so they were laying off people. So that's where you see, that was even when we were talking about laying off police and firefighters. So that's when we were cutting community center hours, library hours. That's how we balanced the budget. So it came back into balance, but you can see that. Going forward, they're estimating next year a $9 million deficit. For those of us who lived through the $100 million deficit years, sounds like a piece of cake, but it's not. So when you think about it, whose budget is going to get cut to cut $9 million bucks? And if we want to add something else, where does that money come from? So the city is currently at about 6,200, 6,100 authorized employees. We still have a lot of vacancies, but there's about 6,000 employees. San Jose is one of the most thinly staffed cities that we compare to. So you have fewer staff to service those needs than other jurisdictions. So when we take a little bit of time in the call center to answer, that may be a reason to answer the phone. That may be a reason why. On the other hand, to me, it's not an excuse if that's a priority city service, if that makes sense. So realistically, we don't have a lot of staff. On the other hand, it's up to people like you to tell us where we need to be adding staff to provide the level of service that you need. Now, realize that staff is going to come out of someplace else unless there's additional revenue. And we can all hope revenue goes up. The other thing I wanted to point out, of course, this report is for 2016-17. So one of the major events during that year was the flood. If you could hit that. Yeah. So the reports that we're doing, so we do these every year. The data goes back at least 10 years for most items so that you can see what the trend is. We do it every year, and then we have these extraordinary events. So of course in February of 2017, we had the flood that deeply impacted several departments, in fact, most departments. So a lot of public works dollars from your public works department went into repairing park damage, other damage, street damage, storm drain damage. So it really did slow down a lot of what was going on in the city. So in this year's report, we did put that in the report to make it clear. Sometimes we've got a really good excuse. It's like something calamitous happens. And that's going to affect almost every city department. The part I wanted to point out here that I keep, it always just fascinates me. 4,000 employees turned out in the days immediately after the flood to help clean up. And it was just an extraordinary community effort to the extent you all were out there with me in the mud. We appreciate it. The rest of the report then goes through department by department, and I am, because of time, going to roll through these pretty quickly. They are in alphabetical order. Okay, the reason for that is we could never find anything when we tried to do it by service. So we just put the whole thing in alphabetical order by department. So one of my goals today is to make sure you know what goes on in the different departments. Then you're going to know what chapter to go to. I do not expect you to read this report cover to cover. I think I'm one of the only people in the city who does that. And I have to do it a few times to make sure we get it all right. But what it's designed to do is when you have a question about a city department or a city service, this, I hope, is a go-to book where you can find out what's going on. So, airport. 11.5 million passengers, a lot of people coming and going through the airport. You can see here, the yellow is pretty hard to see, but you can see regional airport traffic has been going up pretty steadily over the last 10 years. You can see where San Jose's traffic dipped. The dip in traffic was right after we sold a bunch of bonds to rebuild the airport. So they were in a pretty deep financial pickle. It's the technical term for it. They have since, their passenger traffic is going up. When you hear them bragging about passenger traffic, it's because it's deeply important to the airport so they are break even and they can keep rebuilding and enhancing services at the airport. The next slide I'm going to show you is economic development. Again, I apologize for the yellow here. It makes it a little hard to read. Jobs per employed resident down there on the left. San Jose is the only major city in the US that loses population during the day. We have less money because of that. So if we have more jobs in San Jose, we're going to have more revenue. If they businesses sell things, well, some businesses sell things. Businesses are supposed to sell things. They sell things, they also pay business tax. So they're paying sales tax and business tax. They're also building extraordinarily expensive buildings. So we get property tax off of that. So we get, for every dollar of property tax you pay, city gets 10-12% of that. So if you build a $1 billion campus, that's a lot of property tax for the city of San Jose. So it's an ongoing issue, not just well, let me show the map. So the map shows the jobs in San Jose. So all of them are north of here. Almost all of them are north of here, which puts pressure on our transportation network, of course. But they're north and they're even farther north. So you go north on 101 or 280 at 8 a.m. in the morning, you're going to sit there for a long time. Having more jobs in San Jose is going to be important for our transportation network. It's going to also be important for our revenue. The next department is environmental services. So this one is interesting. So if you see the upper left-hand corner, so we all experienced these dramatic increases in different rates at the beginning of the last decade. So they went up pretty steeply. You can see this was the storm sewers, so storm drain fee. You can see how it was climbing. It's since leveled off. And I was happy to see that just because these are costs that get put, and they're now put on property tax bills, get passed on, whether you're a property owner or renter. Keeping those fees down is really important to people being able to stay in their homes. On the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that's a comparison of our Muni water system, which I don't believe serves this neighborhood, this area, but is serving South San Jose. Comparison to that to other San Jose water retailers. So most of you are probably paying the larger, that's the lighter green amount, the larger amount from San Jose Water. Muni Water only serves about 10% of the population. I did want to point out, even last year, 95% of residents in our survey said they were conserving water, which is terrific because even though we called off the water emergency last year, I'm not sure what City Council is going to have to do in the coming year. We can keep hoping for rain. The next department, and again, it's just in alphabetical order, so I'm sorry if it feels like we're bouncing around, is the fire department. Some key things here: 91,000 emergencies responded to. 71% of those responses to priority 1 incidents, so those are lights and sirens, they're going quickly down the street. 71% were within 8 minutes. That means 30% weren't. So keep thinking about that one. So one of the things we do is we map the emergency incidents so that you can see how many incidents are in your area. In our report, we also have a chart that shows you what the response time was for your fire station. In addition, we also look, so this report isn't meant to be an audit of looking for improvements, but of course we can't help but do that because we're auditors, so we're always looking for ways to improve services. Bottom left-hand corner, one of the things we were looking at is if we're going to increase that response time so they can get there on time, because 8 minutes isn't a good thing if you stopped breathing. The dispatch time was meeting its target. The turnout time, that means how much time it takes them. Okay, I'm gonna to get down the pole and into the truck. They don't really use poles in most of them, but and then the travel time is one where we're having some problems. Now, San Jose is a very spread out city. We all know that, but what do we do about that if this is something we deeply care about? 75% of residents in our survey rated fire services good or excellent. Only 48% rated fire prevention services as good or excellent. So that can be just the basics. It can be anything from fire inspections. So I don't necessarily know what you all are thinking when you fill out the survey, but it can be anything from, of course, smoke detectors to save lives if you're not going to be there for 8 minutes, or to get people out in time, all the way to inspections of facilities. The next department is housing. So the housing department, you can see here on the resident survey results in the top left, availability of affordable quality housing, 6% rated at good or excellent. I'm trying to figure out where the 6% live. You can also see we chart over time the point in time count of homeless individuals in the city, so individuals who are homeless. So it was about 4,300 last year. About 1,300 were assisted into housing. It's one of the reasons we wanted to do the audit. I mentioned we're doing some audits right now. We're looking at homeless assistance programs to look at whether or not we can confirm those numbers. I want to make sure that when we're assisting somebody into housing, does it stick? Or are we assisting the same person year after year? Information technology, we were talking about the technology in this room. So the information technology, we also have what I call a deficit in information technology in the city. So I will apologize on behalf of all of us. I mean, my laptop took about 8 minutes to load up this morning. So the city has also not been investing heavily in information technology. When you call the city and you ask for a basic piece of information that you think should be readily available, I apologize, sometimes it is not. And it can be a real research project for us to figure out what you may think is a basic piece of information. My rule of thumb when I'm asking staff for information is this easy to get a hold of or is it difficult? If it's easy to get a hold of, then they got no excuses. I need it and I need it soon. If it's difficult, then you may have to be a little more patient. That's why I think this upgrading our information technology systems, all the computer systems in the city, is a critical thing if we're going to keep providing service in the 21st century. The city's customer contact center is also part of that. So some of you may know it. It's the 535-3500. I encourage you to use that number. We've got some really great people there. It takes them a while to answer the phone, but they generally can get you to the right person if you're trying to fish around the city to figure out who's in charge of whatever it is. Because I know sometimes it can be pretty complicated. The library. So libraries, this shows you average weekly circulation by branch in their branch areas. So that's the map that you see here. You know, the libraries are now 75% of residents rate library services good or excellent. Circulation has been dropping across the city, but we actually think that's for other reasons, because when you go into the libraries, they're still packed. I think people are using the Wi-Fi networks in the libraries and using libraries as places to work. The new libraries just seem to be extraordinarily popular. So I'm not really worried about circulation dropping. They are trying to get better at counting ebooks. So those are sometimes difficult to count. Some of the vendors that the city uses don't really count them in a way that we can keep track of it. So I think some of the demand there is shifting to ebooks. So there's more information on the library in the report. Parks and Rec. So this is one of my favorite graphics. I'm sorry it's hard to read. The whole point here is you're not supposed to have to read it. City has 50 community centers, about. We're only operating 12 of them. I just let that sink in. So this graphic actually it lists all 50 of the buildings that we owned and used to be community centers. Now we're down to 12. Now the 12 are all the new rebuilt. So we've got a new model going on at the city where it is this focus on the hub community centers and making them really special. That's another thing where it is interesting in terms of what's important to residents. So is it to have a really good community center? What do we do with those other buildings? So right now my office is doing an audit of the community center reuse program to look at who's in those buildings. Is the city getting any revenue from those buildings? Should we? Are they being given for free to different community organizations? In which case, what services are residents getting from those organizations? So we hope to be reporting on that later this year. I didn't mention parks. So just you'll find more information in the report about parks. 191 neighborhood parks. It is a pretty extraordinary number. That doesn't include the 9 regional parks. 85% of residents report having visited a park at least once in the last year. 41% reported they were at a recreation center. Planning, building, and code enforcement is the next department. You can see here just the volume of work that goes through the development center on the first floor of City Hall. So 41,000 people going through that center. They're not running, they're actually moving more slowly than they would like to move through the development center. 38,000 permits issued. I did want to point out that construction continues to go back up from where it dipped down in 2008, 9, 10. But you can see the timeliness of development services. It's pretty hard to see here. You can see it better in your printed version. We're not hitting the timeliness targets that the city has established. So if you want to build something, it can be pretty hard to get those services timely. In part, that's a staffing issue. We continue to work on that. We've done audits in that area recommending ways to improve the timeliness of those services. Police department is next. You can see here a map of police districts, the number of priority responses that they had in each district. So check out the numbers for your district. The thing that has been worrying me is, again, response time. So some of these services, we can wait a little while. Some of them, we probably can't. So you can see here the police department's priority 1 responses. As their budgets have been reduced, they've had staffing issues. For many years, they were able to maintain their priority 1 response time. So that's lights and sirens. They're coming because you called and it's an emergency. So it's down there around, their target is 6 minutes. They were down there around 6 minutes. It started to climb over the last year. I'm hoping, and what was happening was the priority 2 responses, so the lesser emergencies were going up dramatically. Now what we saw in the last year is even priority 1 response times were being hit, so they were longer than certainly I'd like to see them, and I know the chief would like to see them. I'm hoping that that was the kind of the bottom of the dip. Now that the department is staffing up, they're hiring like mad. Hopefully that was the bottom, and we'll see those response times, well, that was the top. Hopefully we'll see those response times coming down. We do have some more information about police in the report. I did want to point out one number on the next slide, which shows only 37% of residents rated police services as good or excellent. Now, I think that, again, was the bottom that we're going to see, and hopefully with the hiring, you're going to get a better response time, and we're going to see that those numbers start to move up. To me, that's the benefit of having these long-term statistics. You know, I'm going to skip to the Department of Public Works. There's more information about police in there. There's certainly, you know, San Jose still, it spiked in 2012, I believe it was, but our crime rates are now down below the state and nationwide crime rates, but you can see crime rate information in your printed report. The Public Works Department is responsible for building stuff, so capital projects, maintaining city facilities, plan review services, animal care and services. One thing they like to brag a lot about, it's a little thing, but you can see the dog cat thing down in the bottom right-hand corner. Historically, most animal shelters do not, I mean, the numbers in the first part of that graphic are normally what you see when you look across the country. San Jose has a program to help cats so that cats are not having to be euthanized. We also put in here the Office of Retirement Services. That's the next one. A couple of things here. There are currently more people drawing pensions out of our system than are putting money into our pensions. You can see that graphic on the right hand. Now that one goes back, you know, almost 30 years or more. You can see in the old days we had 5 employees for every 1 retiree. Now we're down below 1 to 1. So that's part of what's going on with San Jose. It's a mature retirement plan, and I am happy to talk at length about that plan. What you can see on the bottom right-hand corner is the city's contributions and employee contributions going up. So last year, between the city and employees, the contributions into the plan was about $400 million, so it's a lot of money. There is about $6 billion in the bank. We're about $4 billion short of being able to pay out today all benefits that were previously earned. So when you hear about that pension deficit, that's what it is. I realize I'm running really late. So transportation is the next department. This map here is actually also on the Department of Transportation's Streets webpage. You can scroll in and you can see what the engineers think is the condition of your street, so you can scroll way into it. The condition of our streets currently is rated about fair. Fair means that they may need rebuilding. Rebuilding costs $5 for every one, you know, it's like 5 times as expensive as just keeping them slurry sealed. So I've got an asphalt driveway, I slurry it, I go to Home Depot and buy that gunky stuff and make the kids get out there and, like, you know, swoosh it over the driveway. That totally protects streets. It's the dollars we have for maintaining residential streets they're going up. They kind of hit 0 at one point for a few years, and they're going up now. We're devoting more money to replacing streets, to refurbishing streets. That's going to save us a lot of money in the long run. So that's it for the report. I'm sorry to run so late. The report is online, so that if you want to search for something, you can search online. Happy to, you know, we prepare lots of copies of this. I apologize to those of you who've heard this report before, and I think I'm going to be talking to the Neighborhoods Commission about it. With that, I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'll certainly stay through the break. And thank you very much for the work you do for San Jose. City Hall doesn't work without you guys keeping pushing us, calling us. You know, I mean, sometimes we don't get back to you right away, and I apologize, but please know that it's not that we don't care. So thank you so much for what you do. Appreciate it.